Did you know about this warrant before he moved in?
Yes, I did.
Not a testament to your good judgment.
She was America's sharpest tongue, the no-nonsense judge who turned courtroom drama into daily television gold. For more than 25 years, Judith Sheindlin, known to millions as Judge Judy, ruled the daytime airwaves like no one before her. With her signature glare, her razor-sharp comebacks, and her unshakable sense of justice, she wasn't just another TV personality. She became a cultural phenomenon, a voice of authority that millions trusted. At the height of her fame, she was the highest-paid woman on television, pulling in nearly $50 million a year, more than Hollywood superstars and sports legends combined. But time has a way of humbling even the strongest. When her gavel fell for the last time, Judy disappeared from the spotlight, leaving fans to wonder, what happened to the Queen of Daytime Court? The truth about how she lives now may surprise you, and it may even make you sad. Long before she became the face of courtroom television, Judith Susan Sheindlin was just another ambitious young woman in Brooklyn, New York. Born on October 21, 1942, she grew up in a modest household where discipline and hard work weren't optional. They were survival. Her father, a dentist, and her mother, a homemaker, raised her with a strong sense of independence. From an early age, Judy was outspoken, quick-witted, and unafraid to challenge authority, traits that would later become her trademark. After earning a degree in government from American University in Washington, D.C., she set her sights on law school, attending New York Law School and graduating in 1965. At just 23 years old, she passed the bar and became a practicing attorney in New York City. She first worked as a corporate lawyer, but her fiery personality clashed with the quiet monotony of corporate law. It wasn't long before she pivoted to criminal law, where she could test her grit in the trenches of justice. In 1972, she was appointed as a prosecutor in New York's family court system, a world where broken families, neglected children, and bitter custody battles dominated the docket. There, Judy made a name for herself. Unlike many lawyers who softened their words, Judy was unfiltered. She cut through lies and posturing with a piercing directness that earned her both respect and fear. Word of her sharp tongue and refusal to play games spread quickly, catching the attention of then New York Mayor Ed Koch. In 1982, Koch appointed her as a judge in the city's family court. It was a role that suited her perfectly. She presided over thousands of cases, tackling everything from domestic disputes to juvenile crimes. But it wasn't her rulings alone that drew notice. It was her demeanor. She refused to tolerate excuses, laziness, or disrespect. Lawyers who tried to play games were quickly shut down. Defendants who lied or wasted her time were cut off with biting remarks. Judy became known as the toughest judge in New York, a reputation that only grew as journalists began to write about her court style. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, she was gaining attention outside of New York. A 1993 profile in the Los Angeles Times called her a no-nonsense judge who cuts through sob stories, and that exposure put her on the radar of television producers. With daytime TV already saturated with talk shows and dramas, the idea of a real judge bringing her authentic courtroom style to television was seen as a potential hit. In 1996, Judy made the leap from the courtroom to the soundstage, signing on to star in a new program called Judge Judy. What no one could have predicted at the time was that this move would change the landscape of daytime television forever. When Judge Judy premiered in September 1996, few could have imagined the cultural juggernaut it would become. At the time, courtroom shows existed, but none had the bite, charisma, or star power Judy Sheindlin brought. From the very first episode, Audiences were captivated. The format was simple: small claims disputes, real plaintiffs and defendants, and Judge Judy at the center, slicing through lies with surgical precision. But what elevated it beyond a niche legal program was Judy herself. She was witty, sharp, brutally honest, and unrelentingly tough. Her catchphrases, "Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining," or "Beauty fades, dumb is forever," became part of American pop culture. Viewers tuned in not just to see justice served, but to see Judy dismantle dishonesty and arrogance with her quick tongue and commanding presence. Ratings skyrocketed, and by the late 1990s, Judge Judy was one of the most watched daytime shows on television, rivaling even Oprah Winfrey. By the mid-2000s, the show consistently drew over 10 million viewers daily, a staggering number for syndicated television. It wasn't just popular, it was dominant. At its peak, it was the highest-rated daytime show in America, outperforming talk shows, soap operas, and game shows. For CBS, it was a goldmine, and for Judy, it was the role of a lifetime. Her salary reflected her unmatched success. By 2005, she was already making millions per season. And in 2012, she signed a deal that made her the highest-paid television host in the world, reportedly earning $47 million a year. To put that into perspective, she was making more annually than Oprah, Ellen, or even network news anchors who commanded primetime audiences. Beyond the paycheck, Judy became a pop culture icon. She was parodied on Saturday Night Live, referenced in countless sitcoms, and even appeared in commercials and cameos. But unlike many celebrities, she wasn't chasing fame. It came to her naturally through her authenticity. What people saw on TV was the real Judy, the same woman who once ruled New York's family court with an iron fist. Her fame also extended beyond television. She became a best-selling author, penning books that blended her sharp humor with life lessons. Titles like "Don't Pee on My Leg" and "Tell Me It's Raining and Beauty Fades," "Dumb is Forever" flew off shelves, cementing her as more than a TV personality. She was a brand. Yet at the heart of it all, Judy insisted she wasn't acting. She wasn't playing a role or following a script. Every case, every exchange, every ruling was authentic. That authenticity is what resonated with millions who saw her as a truth-teller in a world of spin. Her show aired in over 100 countries, making her an international figure. Housewives, college students, retirees, and professionals alike found themselves glued to the screen, often rearranging their daily routines to catch Judge Judy's rulings. She became America's judge, the voice of authority that spoke for people tired of excuses and dishonesty. But as her star soared higher, so did the pressures. The constant filming schedule, the weight of public expectation, and the personal sacrifices began to take their toll. Behind the scenes, Judy's empire was flourishing, but her life was becoming more complicated than fans realized. While the cameras captured a woman in full control of her courtroom, the reality behind the scenes was far more complicated. Judge Judy Sheindlin was not only the face of one of the most successful shows in television history, she was also its driving force. With millions of dollars on the line each season and a massive production team to oversee, the pressure to keep the machine running was immense. Each taping day was grueling. Episodes were filmed back-to-back, with Judy sometimes presiding over a dozen cases in a single day. For viewers, the magic of television made it seem seamless, but for Judy, it was mentally exhausting. The disputes ranged from petty arguments about unpaid loans to emotionally charged conflicts involving broken families and betrayal. Even though these were technically small claims, the weight of human drama was anything but small. Day after day, Judy had to summon the energy to cut through deceit and get to the truth. It was this consistency that made her a star, but it came at a cost. Behind the camera, stories began circulating about conflicts with producers, lawsuits involving crew members, and even accusations of a toxic work environment. Some former staff claimed the environment was tense, with Judy's perfectionism and temper setting the tone. Judy herself was unapologetic. She believed the success of the show demanded nothing less than total commitment. "If you're not pulling your weight, you're out," she famously said in interviews. Her tough-as-nails approach extended not only to the litigants on screen, but also to those who worked to keep her empire afloat. There were also disputes over money, lots of it. In 2013, Judy found herself at the center of a lawsuit filed by a former producer who claimed she was overpaid and that her salary cut into profits owed to others. CBS and Judy denied any wrongdoing, but the case shined a light on just how staggering her paycheck was compared to anyone else in daytime television. At the same time, critics began to question whether her brand of tough love was sometimes too harsh. While many viewers loved her cutting remarks, others accused her of belittling or humiliating litigants for entertainment. Social media amplified these criticisms, with clips of Judy's sharpest takedowns going viral, sparking debates about whether she was empowering truth or exploiting ordinary people. Privately, Judy dealt with the toll of maintaining her public persona. She rarely showed vulnerability, but those closest to her admitted that the endless grind and the pressure to always be on left her weary. After decades of service as both a real judge and a TV judge, the emotional strain of hearing lies, betrayals, and personal failings daily began to weigh heavily on her. Friends noted she often escaped to her homes in Naples, Florida, and Greenwich, Connecticut, just to breathe away from the spotlight. And yet, Judy couldn't walk away. The show was too successful, and she was too deeply tied to it. Every season renewal meant more millions, more viewers, and more responsibility. But as the years wore on, Judy began to sense what few dared admit: that the empire she built was slowly becoming a prison. By the late 2010s, Judge Judy had already become the longest-running courtroom show in history, an empire that dominated daytime television for more than 2 decades. But nothing lasts forever, and behind the glossy ratings reports and record-breaking salaries, tensions were simmering. Judy Sheindlin, who had always prided herself on her independence and control, found herself increasingly at odds with CBS, the network that syndicated her show. The cracks began to show when Judy started speaking publicly about her frustrations with how the network handled her courtroom empire. For years, she had been loyal, delivering season after season of strong ratings. But she began to feel that her vision was no longer being prioritized. The dispute centered around ownership of the library of Judge Judy episodes. Thousands of hours of content worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Judy believed she had earned a say in how her work would be preserved and monetized, but the network executives had their own agenda. By 2020, Judy made the shocking announcement that the show was ending after its 25th season. Fans were stunned. For many, Judge Judy wasn't just another program. It was a daily ritual, a dependable presence in their lives. The idea that the gavel was falling for the final time left millions heartbroken. Judy herself tried to keep a brave face, but her interviews revealed hints of bitterness. She admitted openly that CBS had made decisions she didn't agree with, including shelving her new courtroom show, Hot Bench, in favor of other projects. For a woman who had built her empire on calling out unfairness, it felt like a betrayal. Still, Judy didn't want her legacy to end with a corporate squabble. She announced her next project, Judy Justice, a streaming show on Amazon's IMDb TV, later rebranded Freevee. It was billed as a continuation of her legacy, a chance to bring her courtroom into the modern age of streaming. But while Judy Justice did gain attention, it never reached the cultural heights of the original. Without the same loyal daytime TV audience, and without the decades of tradition that made Judge Judy an institution, the new series felt smaller, quieter, and less impactful. For Judy, it was a stark reminder that lightning rarely strikes twice. The ending of Judge Judy wasn't just the close of a TV program, it was the close of an era. An entire generation had grown up watching her no-nonsense rulings, and now she was stepping into a media landscape that was unfamiliar and less forgiving. The Queen of Daytime Court had left her throne, and while she insisted she was ready for the change, the look in her eyes during interviews told another story. For a woman who thrived on the energy of millions tuning in each day, the silence of life after the gavel was deafening. When the cameras stopped rolling on Judge Judy, it marked the end of a cultural era. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, Judy Sheindlin no longer had a guaranteed place in the daily lives of millions of Americans. For a woman who had built her identity on being the sharpest, toughest voice in television, the transition into life after the spotlight was not as smooth as many imagined. Judy attempted to keep her empire alive with Judy Justice, a new courtroom show that launched in 2021 on Amazon's streaming platform IMDb TV, later renamed Freevee. On paper, it seemed like a worthy successor. The format was similar. Judy still sat on the bench, and litigants continued to bring their disputes. But there was one crucial difference. It lacked the magic of the original. Viewers who had grown accustomed to watching her at 4 p.m. on their local station every weekday weren't always willing to find her on a niche streaming service. Ratings were decent, but nowhere near the dominance she once commanded. Critics noted that while Judy hadn't lost her edge, the cultural landscape had shifted. Daytime television no longer held the same influence, and streaming audiences were younger, less loyal, and less interested in courtroom programming. For Judy, this reality was sobering. After being the highest-rated host in daytime TV for years, she now found herself in a world where her presence barely made headlines. Even more unsettling was how quickly the media spotlight shifted. For years, Judy was a staple of tabloid stories, talk show interviews, and cultural conversations. But in the years after her departure from Judge Judy, the attention dwindled. Aside from occasional mentions when Judy Justice was renewed, Judy's name no longer carried the same weight in pop culture. She continued to live comfortably, her fortune estimated at nearly $500 billion, but money could not buy the adoration of millions of daily viewers. She retreated more into her private life, dividing her time between her sprawling estates in Naples, Florida, Greenwich, Connecticut, and Beverly Hills. Once known for working tirelessly, she was now spotted occasionally in public, dining quietly with her husband, Jerry Sheindlin, or attending charity events. But for someone who had spent 25 years being a commanding presence in households across America, this quieter existence felt hollow. Even Judy herself admitted in interviews that she missed the energy of the courtroom and the constant engagement with her audience. She had traded daily relevance for semi-retirement, and it was a difficult adjustment. What made it sad for fans was the contrast. On Judge Judy, she was untouchable, the queen of daytime, sharp as ever. But in her post-show years, the silence of her absence from mainstream television highlighted a simple truth. Fame is fleeting, even for the strongest. For decades, Judge Judy Sheindlin seemed indestructible. Her sharp tongue, commanding presence, and endless energy made it easy for fans to forget that behind the robe was a human being facing the same challenges that time imposes on everyone. But as she entered her late 70s and then her 80s, Judy began to feel the weight of age. She may have looked fierce on television, but even she couldn't outrun the frailties that came with growing older. Health concerns began to surface quietly, though rarely discussed in public. She admitted to suffering from bouts of exhaustion, and there were whispers of medical scares. One in particular in 2011 when she suddenly collapsed while filming an episode. Though she brushed it off at the time, saying she had experienced a mini-stroke or transient ischemic attack, the incident rattled her fans and served as a reminder that even the sharpest minds can falter. She recovered and returned to work, but the shadow of vulnerability lingered. Beyond health, Judy also wrestled with the emotional side of slowing down. For a woman who thrived on a packed schedule and the stimulation of constant arguments, retirement and quieter days were a challenge. Friends described her as restless, pacing around her lavish homes, trying to fill the silence with books, television, and family visits. But no amount of luxury could replace the daily adrenaline rush of presiding over cases. Her family life, while stable on the surface, also carried its own complexities. Judy has been married twice to the same man, Jerry Shandlin, a fellow judge. Their marriage has endured for decades, but not without difficulty. In 1990, they divorced briefly after a particularly tense period in their relationship. They reconciled and remarried the following year, but those scars never fully vanished. Judy has often joked about the challenges of living with someone as headstrong as herself, but behind the humor was a woman who struggled with balancing her personal identity against her demanding career. Her 5 children and 13 grandchildren brought her joy, but her work had often kept her at a distance during their formative years. Now, with her career winding down, Judy has tried to bridge that gap by spending more time with them. Still, those close to her admit she sometimes feels regret over the years, lost to the relentless grind of her television empire. What makes her struggles even sadder is the contrast between her wealth and her reality. Worth nearly $500 million, Judy has access to everything most people dream of: private jets, luxury estates, and financial security for generations of her family. Yet wealth could not buy back time, nor could it shield her from the loneliness of stepping out of the spotlight. In interviews, she still projects confidence, but her words often reveal subtle cracks. She has spoken about the importance of staying busy, of refusing to sit in a rocking chair and rust. But those statements also reflect an underlying fear of irrelevance, of fading away quietly after a life built on commanding attention. For millions of fans who once saw her as untouchable, the realization that Judge Judy faces the same struggles of aging, health, and regret makes her story not just sad, but painfully human. For someone who spent more than 2 decades as one of the most recognizable figures on television, the quiet that followed Judy Shandlin's departure from Judge Judy has been deafening. Fame, once a constant hum in her life, began to fade, and with it came an unfamiliar companion: loneliness. While Judy has always insisted that she values her privacy, the truth is that the spotlight had become part of her identity. Millions of viewers tuned in daily, not just to see cases resolved, but to see her, to feel her presence commanding the room. When that daily ritual ended, Judy's relevance in popular culture dimmed almost overnight. The saddest part for many fans is that Judge Judy didn't leave television because she had lost her touch. She left at the top of her game. Her wit was still sharp, her rulings still fiery, but in the new media landscape, younger audiences weren't tuning in, and executives didn't see her as the draw she once was. For someone who thrived on being indispensable, it was a harsh reality. She filled her days with travel between her homes in Naples, Greenwich, and Beverly Hills, often spending quiet mornings reading or enjoying the ocean views. To outsiders, it seemed like a dream retirement, but those close to her described stretches of stillness that weighed heavily. She missed the constant interaction, the rush of litigants parading through her courtroom, the cheers from fans who recognized her instantly on the street. Ironically, as she sought more privacy, she also experienced the sting of being forgotten. Younger generations who never saw Judge Judy at its peak now walked past her without a second glance. She was no longer the cultural lightning rod she had once been, but another elderly woman enjoying retirement. For someone who once commanded tens of millions of viewers worldwide, that anonymity could feel like erasure. Even her attempt at revival with Judy Justice revealed the limitations of trying to recapture past glory. The streaming show had a smaller audience, and while loyal fans followed her, the cultural impact was muted. Instead of being a daily presence in millions of homes, she became a niche figure tucked away in the endless sea of streaming content. That, more than anything, highlighted the cruel truth. Fame is temporary, and no one, not even Judge Judy, is immune. The loneliness was compounded by aging. Many of her closest friends and contemporaries were either slowing down themselves or passing away. Though Judy remained active and vibrant, she could not ignore the empty spaces at her dinner tables, the missing voices from her once lively social circle. Even in her large, luxurious homes, she was sometimes alone, surrounded not by the laughter of an audience, but by silence. Fans who once saw her as invincible would be saddened to know how often she wrestled with this quiet isolation. Her legacy remains towering, but the day-to-day reality of her later years is far removed from the powerful image seared into America's collective memory. When history remembers Judge Judy Sheindlin, it won't be for her later years of quiet isolation, but for the empire she built and the way she transformed television. She wasn't just another TV personality. She was a cultural force, a symbol of truth-telling authority, at a time when viewers longed for someone to cut through the noise. For 25 years, her voice carried into living rooms across America, her gavel striking not just against petty disputes, but against dishonesty itself. She gave people permission to demand accountability, to refuse excuses, and to embrace common sense in a world that often seemed to lack it. That legacy is secure, written in television history as one of the greatest runs of all time. But what makes her story bittersweet is the contrast between that towering legacy and the quieter, lonelier reality of her life today. Fans who remember her sharp glare, her cutting one-liners, and her absolute command of the courtroom might be shocked to learn how different things look behind closed doors. Instead of millions of viewers hanging on her every word, there are long stretches of silence. Instead of daily energy, she moves at a slower pace, her world reduced to family gatherings, quiet mornings, and the occasional reminder of who she once was. And perhaps that is the saddest part. Watching someone who embodied strength, authority, and relevance transition into a life where those things no longer define her. Yet even in that sadness, there is something profoundly human. Judge Judy's life now reflects a truth we all must face. No matter how powerful, wealthy, or famous, time humbles everyone. Still, her resilience shines through. She has said many times that she does not fear aging, that relevance is not measured by headlines, but by the lives you touch. And in that sense, her legacy will outlast the ratings, the contracts, and even the fame. Millions grew up with her as a daily fixture. Millions more learned life lessons from her words, and generations to come will still watch her episodes in syndication, laughing at her wit and marveling at her authority. Judge Judy may live a quieter, lonelier life now, but she has already carved her place in history. She remains the queen of courtroom television, the woman who proved that honesty, toughness, and intellect could make a superstar. And while it may make fans sad to see how different her life has become, it also serves as a reminder. Her gavel may be silent, but her impact will echo forever.